Take a moment to go to the chat. Let us know where you're joining the conversation from. And also, if you feel inclined to share any other information about yourself, such as maybe your LinkedIn information, that is your way of letting us know that you are interested in us remaining in touch with you beyond this window of opportunity today. We always like to know where people are joining the conversation from. So take to the chat, let us know where you are located. I am being supported today by my colleagues, the team at NWC, who do such an amazing job of ensuring that the production of our Intentional Conversations podcast is a pleasant experience for all of those who join. And so I'm always so appreciative of them. This gives me a chance also to shout out my colleague, Cosette Strong, who last week in my absence actually led our Intentional Conversations podcast and did so beautifully. And so I always appreciate when colleagues are willing to step up and to participate in that type of capacity. I also want to give you an opportunity to know that cameras today are not required. They are highly encouraged. It helps us to get proximate to each other as we're learning with and from each other in this virtual environment. So certainly do not be afraid to turn those cameras on. We love to see smiling faces. You will be given an opportunity at some point today to be able to unmute yourself and to share, to be a part of today's dialogue and conversation. So I hope that you will take advantage of that when the opportunity presents itself. Okay, so again, this is Intentional Conversations VodCast. We are getting started. Welcome. Once again, if you're just joining us and getting settled into this virtual podcast space, I want to welcome each of you to Intentional Conversations VodCast. This is where we have discussions, where we intersect diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership and business. And I serve as your host, Dr. Nika White. One of the things that we are really proud of is that not only is this a live vodcast for audience members who like to be directly a part of the conversation while it's happening, but we also take the audio and make it available in a podcast capacity to extend the reach of all of the great information that's being shared in this virtual community. So if you know of those individuals who like to receive their content in a podcast capacity, let them know. I'm also excited to share with you that now we go live on LinkedIn. And so right now there are individuals who may be surfing LinkedIn and perhaps they come upon this information and they are tuning in as well. So again, just another opportunity for us to extend the reach of this podcast community. Now, I've been sharing with you all month long that August is National Black Business Month, and I want to continue to keep amplifying that. We have to support Black-owned businesses. And as a Black-owned business myself, I am super proud to be able to be a Black-owned business and to be able to provide opportunities for my colleagues and for opportunities to also be able to extend the work that we are very passionate about at NWC to other organizations. And so shout out to all of the Black businesses who are doing the darn thing. Now, I am equally excited to share with you that I am now a 3-time author. Pre-orders are available for my book entitled Inclusion Uncomplicated. It's a transformative guide to simplify DEI. It is available for pre-order right now on Amazon. This is in partnership with Forbes Book. This has been a labor of love, and I cannot wait to get it into the hands of as many people as possible. So thank you in advance for your support, and I look forward to hearing what you think about Inclusion Uncomplicated. Now, here at NWC and with our podcast, we like to make sure we're giving you a heads up of what you have to look forward to in the upcoming weeks. And so on Friday, August 26th at 11 a.m., back here for our live Intentional Conversations podcast, we have Lisa Jolopter, who's going to join us as our guest co-host. And we're going to be discussing organizational equity through the employee life cycle, how to solve microaggressions. And there's nothing micro about microaggressions or even micro inequities. But how do we solve for that in the workplace? And what are some organizational do's and don'ts that we need to be mindful of? I also want to give you a little bit of a heads up for what's to come. Starting in September, we have another great month of wonderful co-hosts, and we're super excited for you to mark your calendar, save the date, and to join us. You're not going to want to miss these upcoming guests and what they have to share on Intentional Conversations VodCast. And if you happen to know of someone that you think would make a great host for this community, we would love to be able to reach out and have a conversation with them. Many of our guest co-hosts have come from you all saying, hey, have you heard about this person? They are amazing. I think it would add for a great conversation to expand, again, this community of learners. And so we want to hear from you. We're now booking for guests for Q1 of 2023. Believe it or not, we're all booked out for this year. So please send your recommendations to my colleague, Amora Carter, and you can send that to amora@nikawhite.com. Now, it does me great pleasure to shift our attention to providing you with a formal introduction of today's guest co-host, Dr. Jen Fry. And I know it's going to be a wonderful conversation, and so I look forward to jumping right in. But before I do so, I always like to make sure that I can provide information for this audience regarding our guest co-host credentials, how they show up to this space, their accolades, because there's a lot of good things that are happening that I want you to know about. So let me do that now, and then I'll welcome Jen Fry to come and to greet this audience in her own way. Dr. Jen Fry, her pronouns are she, her. She runs Jen Fry Talks, LLC, a social justice education firm that uses conversations to educate and empower those within organizations through an anti-racist lens. Jen teaches and speaks on issues of race, inclusion, intersectionality, diversity, and equity. She's an expert facilitator and works with small and large groups, departments, teams, K-12 schools, affinity groups, identity groups, and so much more. She uses an anti-racist lens to advise on best practices to help her clients create equitable searches, hiring, onboarding practices, retaining and supporting students, staff, and coaches, as well as community building. Jen is also a veteran coach with over 15 years of experience at the collegiate level. Jen earned her PhD in geography from Michigan State University. Go Green, her words, not mine, but yes, for today, go Green, Jen. And I can't wait for us to learn more about her work in this space of geography. She has a really important niche and an angle that I think is going to create for a really interesting conversation. So podcast community, in your own way, please take to the chat and welcome our guest co-host, Dr. Jen Fry, in your own way. Let her know that we've been expecting her, that we're excited to be in conversation with her. I'm going to add her as the spotlight. Jen, thanks for being here. I think I prepared you in saying that after we read your bio, we certainly are going to want to give you a chance to share a little bit more with us about yourself. And here's where we're looking for, what do we not know about you that we could not know just from reading your bio? What are some of those other intersecting identities or interesting facts about Jen that helps to shape how in which you show up to this work?
Friends, I appreciate you here. I see some people in the chat saying Friday. I actually have Friday shirts, and I'm embarrassed that I forgot. It literally is a thing of fries and it says Friday. So I am so appalled at forgetting my one chance to show up with my shirt, and I forgot. I am mad at myself now. I'm like,
So
oh,
funny.
I should have had it. Friends, I'm excited to be here with you. Let me just kind of give a brief descriptor of who I am. So I'm a Black female. I have an afro that has some nice blonde streaks in it. I'm wearing a green shirt with a razzle dazzle colored fist. Behind me, I have I'd say like a nice dusty blue wall with some really cool African art behind me, and some foliage. And I say the foliage because one of my best friends is an interior designer. And so she decorated my back. So I did not do this. Do not be in the chat asking me if I did this. I did none of this. She did it all. And she says, I always should have a tree in the corner to soften corners. That is the rule you want. So I have this foliage back here that I move out of the window whenever I'm not doing any type of podcast or anything. So just know that trees soften corners. Do you have any question about that? To give you just a little bit, I guess, a brief insight of who I am is I'm a person who was raised in Arizona. I was formerly undocumented. So I came from Canada. I was a person that had really easy citizenship. And so that's kind of part of my story. Literally back in the 80s, the one good thing that Ronald Reagan did is he had this amnesty law, and he said, if you have lived in the country for this long and have this, this, and this, you get an immediate path to citizenship. Immediate. So my path to citizenship probably took like 6 months. And it was maybe like, it was like $300 or $400. And I got my green card. And the funny part about it is that the only reason I became a citizen was because it was cheaper to become a citizen than keep a green card. And I did that like in 2007, 2008. And I was like, you know what? I might as well just become a citizen. Ugh. And you have to go and take the test and all that. And so I kept missing the test. And it came to be a point where they're like, if you don't take this test, you will not be able to become a citizen. So I was like, fine, I'll do it. And so that was literally my path to becoming a US citizen, was something that easy and something I didn't pay attention to. And I really hold that opportunity really near and dear to my heart because it was so easy for me. And I understand that other people don't get to have that opportunity. And I grew up, like I said, 5 minutes from the Mexican border in Arizona. I was a 3-sport athlete. I was someone that my mom she didn't graduate high school. She worked at the library for 14, 15 years. So I'm a huge bookworm. And I never thought of like college as being, oh, Lynn, you know it, go white. Yes, Lynn, I appreciate you, Sam. You already know, go green, go white. So I never really thought about college as an opportunity. I didn't even know it existed in a way to educate. And the reason I was able to go to college was that my club volleyball coach, because I played 3 sports in high school, she was like, hey, do you want to come play at the junior college I coach at? And I was like, okay, sure. I really didn't have an understanding of what that meant. Graduated and then went and moved to a 4-year school in Alabama. And that's where I kind of found my love of coaching. And from that point, people were like, well, you can go and get a master's and coach. I didn't even know what a master's was. Like, I had no idea. So I'm at 23 and I have a master's. I don't even know what that means. And I coached for about 15 years. And I decided I coached all over the US. I coached if you know sports, I coached in the Pac-12 at Washington State. I coached in the Big Ten at Illinois when we played for a national championship in 2011. Right there is our runner-up trophy. If you can see right in the little corner right there. Go Cougs, Jeff, right there is my little trophy, which I'm still bitter we lost to UCLA. So if you are on this call and you have a UCLA degree, just know I don't like you. And I'm very open about my disgust because you beat me 11 years ago and I still am bitter. And so I coached all over the place, ended at Elon. And when I was at Elon, that's where I realized that race and sport wasn't talked about the way I wanted it to. And so I decided to leave coaching. I before thought I would be a coach for the 70, 80 years. That would be my whole life. And then it wasn't, because I found kind of a new method to educate people. And so I left, didn't know what I was going to do, went and worked at Duke for a few years. And that's where I decided, about that time is when Colin Kaepernick kneeled. And all of my coaching friends were like, what do we do? How do we handle this? I might get fired. My AD is telling me to kick people off the team if they kneel, all of these things. And so I became kind of the go-to person for it because there was no one in the sports space that was helping people navigate this. Back then in 16, it was new, right? And so I decided to leave and become a full-time owner of my company, as well as get my PhD. And so by training, I'm a sports geographer. If you pay attention to sports and what's going on with Brittany right now, who's in Russia, I look at what does it look like to be a Black athlete in Europe? What does it mean to be in this space where you're celebrated, but also at the same time, you're thought to be a sex worker, you're attacked, right? You're spit on. So all these multiple things are happening to people at the same time. And so kind of that really interacts with my company because I really center what does it mean to be someone that's marginalized and to have to navigate the world.
No, I love that. And before we actually went live today, you helped educate me on what sport geographer is exactly. So I so appreciate you bringing that to the conversation. I understand that it's pretty rare. There's only maybe a handful, if that, of individuals that have that specificity in terms of their discipline. And so I heard you describe it as you really do look at place and space and the impact for Black athletes, or minority athletes. And so I think that's really unique, and I wanted just to amplify that for this community. So you've told us about your background and how it led you to your career in social justice education, focusing on sports. I want to just get your thoughts now about the role that coaching staffs should play in really helping to bring a lens of DEI into the mindsets of college athletes. Is that important? And if it is, why it's important, and how can the coaching staff do that in an effective way?
That's a good question, Doc. And I think the biggest thing is that if you're a coach of K through 12, if you're coaching Pee Wee, if you're coaching 10, 11, 12-year-olds, if you're coaching college athletes, if you're coaching professional athletes, helping people be culturally competent is about helping create great humans. Like literally, when you're a coach, part of it is to help create great humans. Part of it is helping people bump their nose and learn about themselves, learn about other people, learn how to interact, learn how to be in a team. And so that doing DEI work is literally a part of helping people develop themselves. And I think it's left out because coaches are like, well, this is only my job is the X and O's and the recruiting. But this is also your job, is to help create great humans, because being on a team, there's nothing like it in sport. Literally, it does not matter if you hate that person, you have to work with them for a common goal. It can be your biggest nemesis. It better not show on that court. I know that. You better be the best of friends when it comes to that court. When you step off, y'all can go and sword fight. I don't care. But you have to learn how to work together with people for a common goal. Because if you don't do your part, the whole team will be destroyed.
Yeah.
And so learning how to be culturally competent is about helping people learn about themselves to be great humans and great people that add to communities. And a part of it that's tough though for coaches is that means that they have to turn the lens on themselves.
Yeah.
Because, if I'm helping you become great, I have to learn what's holding me back from being great. I have to learn about how am I handling my biases? How am I handling different ethnicities, races, language, accents? Like, how am I managing that? Because the one thing that we always hear is like, well, I treat all my athletes the same. And I'm like, baby, you even treat your own kids the same. What you mean? I know every favorite kid. If you have more than one kid, you have a favorite kid. Period. Right? The sixth of six kids. Jen Fry is the favorite kid of Carol Fry. If I called Mauricio, you're the favorite. If I called my sister and be like, who's the favorite of moms? She'd be absolutely you. Like, I am Carol Fry's favorite kid. So when people try and tell me I treat my athletes the same, but you don't even treat the kids that are yours the same, there's a disconnect. Because what people don't want to realize, it's not about treating people the same, it's about treating them fairly.
Yeah.
And fairly across the board is different. If I have an athlete that is a foster kid, I'm going to treat that athlete differently than someone that comes from a two-parent household, because there's going to be different needs that they need. And so I think the thing is that's really tough, and why coaches stay away from doing DEI work is because they have to turn the lens on themselves, and they have to say, how was I raised? What language did my parents use around me? What things did they subconsciously do that created the form of my biases? Maybe it was seeing someone in a wheelchair and my parents were like, oh my gosh, we don't talk to them. Something has to be wrong with them. So now you creating kids that if they see someone in a wheelchair, that's bad, that's negative. Or if they're now in a wheelchair, it's bad. And so coaches have to turn that lens and say, what do I need to work on in myself? Because they're role models that will then help their athletes. And I think learning about this stuff is so critical because we're trying to create great humans.
Yeah, so I'm curious, Jen, when you think about coaches and how their livelihood is to win, right? Because it's all about the competition. You want to win. Yep. Now, I can see how there could be some internal turmoil that maybe they experience where they're thinking about, I want to always go to my trusted best, however best is defined for them. And thinking about that, sometimes I could imagine that it could work against the mindset of really trying to also provide opportunities for others. And we know that sports is a really big unifier, right? So how do you normally guide and provide counsel to coaches when you are obviously very much set on this space of fairness, the space of justice, knowing that sometimes the competitive nature of a coach can, if you aren't careful, cloud judgment around how inclusive are we really being, how acceptance are we really accepting, are we really being to all of our athletes.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. And the reality of the situation is that different causes conflict. Like if we are two different people and we want to go get something to eat, it's going to cause some conflict. Where are we going to eat? Does it have food places? Right. My partner loves seafood. I don't eat seafood. So that difference right there changes the dynamic of where we're going to eat at. And the issue is that people can't handle conflict. People do not look at their relationship to conflict. They don't ask themselves, how do I handle when someone goes against what I think? How do I handle when I'm upset? And so because they don't like conflict, they then try and lessen, right, how conflict is going to occur. And so that means maybe I stay pretty homogeneous. That might mean the aspect of I might have one Black or brown person, because then I can handle them, because really what I'm going to do is try and force them to assimilate. But if I get more, now that's going to cause more conflict, and I'm not prepared to handle it. And that's the reality of the situation, is that we as coaches, and I put myself in that bucket because the reason that I do this work is to help young Jen, right? Like, what did you need back when you were a 27-year-old head coach? And this type of stuff is saying conflict is fine. And it actually is going to build you to have a better team. But you have to understand your relationship to it and how you manage it. And people don't even think about that. They either think I'm in conflict or I'm not. They think I either avoid conflict or I'm like super aggressive versus, right? Like I will die on the hill that assertive Black women are always fired for being assertive. I will die on that hill, because if you grow up and you're a conflict avoidant person, anything Black women do feels like aggression. Any type of advocating for ourselves feels like aggression, because you, as maybe a white person, has been taught to never advocate for yourself, that you're supposed to be seen but not heard. And so you have this Black woman who is loud and advocating for herself, and that causes, right, tension. Right. You have a coach who now has these Black athletes who advocate for themselves, and they're not used to that, because coaching is about a power structure. I have the power, your scholarship, your playing time, you have to listen to me, which is why we see these coaches who are so aggressive to athletes, to go back to your point, because we have to win. So I know that my contract, my house, paying for my kids' schooling, or my wife's car, that's all in this contract. And so when the game is on the line, I haven't been taught to manage my emotions. I haven't been taught those type of things. So because of that, and I'm thinking in the back of my head, if we lose this game, we're not going to go to playoffs, I'm not going to get a bonus, I might get fired. I'm going to be overtly more aggressive, because we need to win. And I'm not going to have fairness or anything in mind. All I'm going to think of is I need to win. So I'm going to grab your jersey, I'm going to smack you in the head, whatever it is. And it's going to be, well, because I love you. And I always say, then we're attaching love to aggression to violence. And as a coach, if I'm grabbing and shaking you, if I feel like I could do this stuff out of love, what am I then teaching you that you can do with your partner or your friends or your family? And so we as coaches don't think about those type of things, because we feel like we have to win. You know, the Big Ten just signed $1 billion sports deal with Fox, or with, I think, Fox Sports, Peacock, and NBC. $1 billion. The money is on the line. The contracts are on the line. So because of that, I have not been told or taught how to manage my emotions. So I'm going to do what I've always been, what I've seen and done. It's be aggressive. In men's volleyball at Sacred Heart, the men's coach smacked a player in the face during a timeout. Literally, players there smacked him in the face. We are not helping our coaches learn how to navigate conflict or aggression. And so all they know is what they've been taught, which is, if we are in a spot that might have me get fired in the future, I am going to be aggressive, because that's the only way I know how to manage my emotions. And so that aspect of winning, like you asked, makes me stop wanting to recruit diversity. It makes me not want to have conflict, because conflict might mean that I get fired if I have too much conflict that I'm not able to manage. It might mean that we're not winning. It might mean all of these things. And I have not been trained to manage myself, and my staff has not been trained to manage them. And we as a staff together have not been trained to manage those things. So because of all of that, when this hits the fan and we're losing, I'm going 0 to 1,000, because that's all that I know. And then I'm role modeling that to my athletes, that this is how you handle being in pressure, stress, anxious, uncomfortable is pure aggression.
Oh, Jen, this is so good. And I don't know about the audience that's listening to this conversation, but I have never reflected to this level on the connection points that you're making to the aggressive nature that's correlates with this competitive mindset of having to win and the impact that that could have on the athletes. And I am so glad now that I'm hearing you articulate really the reality of it, that there is there are individuals like yourself that are giving attention to this, because you're so right. I think that it's most parents' desire to put their kids in some type of athletic endeavor, to build the confidence. And so that's kind of what we drive towards. But particularly for the Black and Brown parents, are we considering the implications of that? And are we being thoughtful to make sure that what we are allowing our kids to align with from an athletic experience perspective is not creating harm? And I don't want to at all kind of create this picture of, doing P-ball and all those other things is bad, but you are bringing something to the fore that
So Doc, can I stop you real quick?
Yes.
And you mentioned P-ball. We just had a football coach at a U9 game get murdered by a fan who was upset with a call. In Dallas, Texas, at a 9 and under Pee-wee football game, a parent was upset with the officials. So the coach was officiating and he got upset and they got in an argument and he pulled a gun and killed this dad of 3 at an under 9 game. So when you say, as Black and Brown parents, are we thinking about the harm that we're putting them in some aspects, no, because we ourselves have not been taught how to regulate our emotions. These parents right now are out of control. They are so out of control with how they treat officials, how they treat coaches. I come from clubs and these parents are cussing people out. They are cornering these coaches and treating them so bad because they feel like their kids deserve X, Y, and Z. And because we as a society have not been taught to regulate our emotions, we feel that we can treat people any way we want. And so that's what we're teaching our kids. So we don't know any better than when we have them go to a coach. Because for us, the coach's aggression and anxious and anxiety, that's normal, right? Yeah. And we see parents who are like, well, I was taught by a coach like that. I don't see the problem. We got to teach our men to be strong and masculine. And the way to do that is you got to get roughed up. So we're perpetuating this because we feel the best way to make, especially a male athlete, is through pure aggression, pure anger, pure violence. We don't know anything else of saying like, no, we need to teach them through love and respect and teach them how to manage their emotions and really reflect on who they are. And so we don't do a good job of doing that ourselves. So we don't know how to see different in these coaches.
Right. So what do we do about that? What have you found to be some really good coaching practices to help coaches to lean into this more, to at least be aware of it and just help us to understand what that looks like? How do you resolve for this?
I think the biggest thing is that athletic directors first have to start acknowledging what type of emotion is acceptable to them. And many times it's aggression by a male coach, right? The male coach who's aggressive and screams and yells and cusses people out, that's going to be something that they're okay with. The female coach who maybe does the same or is emotional, they're not going to be okay with that. So I think it starts at the top of saying like, what type of emotion do I feel is acceptable from these coaches?
Yeah. And
to really, because what we have to do as coaches and administrators is really turn the mirror back on us to be able to say, how do I react in relationships, friends, family, work relationships? Like, how do I really react? How do I think about conflict? And people really do not think about that in depth. My partner, he always tells me I'm an overthinker. I think so in depth about everything. And I think one of the things is we don't think about where our relationship to conflict began. Was it that you saw your parents screaming at each other and the only way that you could get a word in was you had to scream back? Was it that you are conflict avoidant because you knew that if you said something, you get punched in the mouth, right? Did you have to manipulate because that's the only way you could get you didn't know how to advocate for yourself, so you had to manipulate. And that's the only way you can get your needs met. And so the way that we do that is we start getting these coaches to really reflect on why they do what they do and where they learn that. Mm-hmm. Because if we start realizing, well, I learned how to do this in coaching from other coaches, from my dad, from this, and this, maybe we can start having some change happen. But if you just say, well, you're aggressive to a coach, or you shouldn't do this, and they have learned to do this for 20, 30 years and never have thought of any other different way, well, we're not going to help them out.
Yeah.
And so it really is, right? So we really have to start peeling back the layer. And this is on any DEI topic. Where did you learn what you know?
Yeah.
Because if we start getting people to pull back all the layers of where did you learn what you know, then we maybe can start seeing change and saying, well, you learned about disability through your parents talking really badly about disabled people. Mm-hmm. You learned about race by your parents always just calling people welfare mom and locking the door anytime they're in a Black neighborhood. And so when you start peeling back, where did you learn what you know? Then we're going to start seeing more change, especially when it comes to aggression and anger in the athletic space.
Yeah. So I'm going to take kind of an approach just to get your reactions to it. What about those who say coaches that do this, they are effective? Their role is not to help avoid any type of harm for their athletes. Their role is to win games, win championships, bring in money. And so you're placing too much responsibility on the coaching staff. What do you say to that? Because I would imagine that maybe that's some of the sentiments of those who are in those positions who are not thinking along those lines. What do you say to that?
So I say that when you tell someone's mom that you're taking care of their kid, this is a part of it. When you sit in someone's house and saying your son or daughter or child is coming at 2,000 miles away, we are going to take care of them. This is a part of the taking care. The taking care doesn't only mean that they win games. The taking care is making sure that we are creating great humans, that when they leave my program in 4 years, that they've learned a lot of good skills that help them be a great human. And understanding how they handle conflict is a part of that. Because if I'm only thinking of the sport and I'm doing whatever it takes to win, we're going to see athletes that are coming out that are going to jail, they're in abusive relationships. We're seeing female identified athletes who don't know how to advocate for themselves. So because they haven't been taught that, they put themselves in potentially harmful situations because they don't have coaches who are like, no, we're going to make sure to help you learn how to advocate for yourself in all aspects. And so that's a part of the role as a coach, is that when I'm sitting there telling a mom, we're taking care of your kid, a part of it is helping them learn and grow. That is a part of it. And if you as a coach are not really holding on to that, then you shouldn't be coaching, because the X's and O's, that, you might win. You might have a trophy. But if I'm not helping you build the skill set to be a great parent, a great friend, a great partner, a great teammate, a great employee, a great supervisor, then I am not doing my job.
Yeah, no, I love that. I applaud that. I champion those sentiments. And I think that also there's a responsibility on those who the coaching staff are reporting into to make sure as they are, communicating the expectations that is well-rounded. It's not just about the championship and, building a solid, athletic team that can yield results, but it's also about the whole person. So I love that you brought that to the conversation. So I want to shift a little bit, and momentarily we are going to open up to the audience for you to present your questions and contributions to the conversation. So be thinking of those. You can do so by simply raising your hand and I'll spotlight you. Or you can also send your questions and place them into the chat and we'll make sure it gets brought to our dialogue. So Jen,
yes, you're right about that. Can I just make a point on what Andrea says about trauma?
Yes,
because it kind of goes back to the conflict. Andrea, 100%. And what I talk about is people need to understand how trauma affects how they handle conflict.
So let's do this, Jen. I want to read her statement because for the podcast audience that's going to also be able to get the audio, I want them to have knowledge of what we're talking about. So one of our VodCast guests shared into the chat, I think we also overlook trauma that folks have endured, layered trauma that is untreated and exacerbates. We are all coming out of a global pandemic where we were all traumatized. So true. If your lived experience includes other forms of trauma, what we lived through in quarantine is only compounded. So that's what you're addressing now, Jen. Go for it.
Yeah, and 100%. I talk about your relationship to trauma as your relationship to conflict. because so there's a really good trauma informed certificate through Arizona Trauma Institute. It's phenomenal. It's like $70. It's great. And what they say is that there's no emotion isn't bad or good, because many times we say like, oh, you are mad, so that's a bad emotion. You're happy, that's good. And there is no bad or good emotion. Emotion is what it is, and it's there to protect you. So if you are a very aggressive person, that emotion, that method was there to protect you in this situation. And now it's about how do we reframe that so that we can start doing it a different way. But everyone coming out of COVID is traumatized like hell. And if you're not, you're lying to yourself.
Right.
There's no way you could have been quarantined and maybe by yourself and not having any physical touch and scared of anyone that you're not coming out unscathed. It's impossible. And so how you handle all that is so traumatic. And people need to understand that your trauma also affects how you manage conflict. And it might be a traumatic response in how you handle conflict. If I know that anytime I had to be really aggressive and cuss people out to protect myself, that's a traumatic response that I now use on others. So 100% trauma absolutely informs conflict.
Yeah, well, it's, the saying, hurt people hurt people. It doesn't give them an excuse for hurting people, but it does give context. Context as to they're probably operating from a place of their own trauma, and they're triggered by whatever they're experiencing in the moment. And it comes out as now I'm inflicting this hurt and this pain on someone else. And so, yeah.
Absolutely.
So we did place into the chat, Mauricio, you're so awesome. He placed into the chat, Arizona Trauma Institute certified clinical trauma specialist. And so thanks, Mauricio. Okay, so I want to talk about this TED Talk. It discusses the lack of diversity within coaching staff. So what impact does that have on athletes?
Representation matters. Representation matters. Representation matters. And when you don't see yourself, you don't think you could do that. I was so lucky. All of my head coaches for volleyball were women. That is unheard of, absolutely unheard of. And my high school coach was a Black woman. And her being a coach for me, being able to see myself really affects me. And it also is that you need someone who's had some of those same experiences to talk to about things. Because, so in my dissertation, I interviewed all former or current professional Black female volleyball players. And one of them, she was in Italy. And her son was really funny and was like, well, do you know if the person talking about me is Black? And she's like, well, I hope so. She's like, because I didn't do my hair. And he's like, well, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, she better be. And it was this idea of I can take off, right? I can take off, this protective measure and be myself in this interview. It's not going to be played to anyone. I don't have to worry about my hair being done. I can just be myself. I can be my Black self. And people don't understand what that means to be able to be X self without having to put protective layers on to make yourself easier to deal with in some ways, because people don't know how to manage that. And so it's so important when these athletes, whoever they are, able to see themselves and be able to talk about experiences others wouldn't not only be able to understand, but you have to give so much background information to be able to talk about an experience. You don't want to talk about it anymore. If I have to explain the past and why this is hurtful and all this to be able to explain this current experience, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's so important that we see more representation, and not just coaches, but all aspects of athletics, because we have football players, I think, represent like 60%. Black football players are like 60% of football players in Division I. It's like 53% of Black males in basketball. And then we see in coaching, I think coaches is like 90% white. Well, how do we have that disconnect? What are we not teaching our Black athletes about coming and coaching that we're teaching our white athletes?
Yeah, no, very, very well stated. So one more question, then again, I'm going to turn to the audience. So we talked a little bit ahead of prepping for today, and I know that part of your belief system is that athletics is a really solid and perfect place to practice radical social justice education. So lean into that a little bit and tell us why that is something that you feel strongly about.
Because it's a place where you're with people for 2, 3, 4 years. You're with people that, and I hate saying family because many times when people use the word family, it's like weaponized. Right. Well, we're part of the family, so you should do this. Well, you don't want to leave your family, right? But like you're part of this community for years where you get to know people in ways that you don't in a workspace. Meaning As an athlete, you're with people for 15, 20 hours a day. You're rooming with them, maybe on the road, you're rooming with them as a roommate, you're going home with them for holidays, you're getting to know their parents, their sisters, their brothers, their cousins. You're getting to know people in such different ways while playing for a common goal. And so it's a great place to help build,
Yeah.
this type of skill set into people because you're around people who are all doing the same thing at the same point.
Mhm.
And so it's a perfect place to try these things out and help folks develop the skills because you're not going to have this type of community in anything else. Not in work, right? People are like, I work 8 to 5 and I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm here from this to this, I'm out of here. And that's not the aspect in sports. In sports, you are with these people and developing such in-depth relationships. It's so, so different. It's a great place to do it.
No, well stated. Okay, so Lynn Roy, I see that your hand is raised, so I'm going to add you to our spotlight. Please feel free to present your question.
Great. I'm enjoying this conversation, not just because you're a fellow Spartan, but just
Hey.
one the energy, and then also um, the focus, because you're over a variety of issues that we need to get tackled. But coming from a higher education background myself, and having worked a lot with Division I programs, and speaking with football programs, hockey programs, etc., to try to do the preventative things. I just was struck by your energy and how you spoke and emphasized navigation, which is true because you have the CHAMPS program, right? You have the counseling centers, you have the academic advisors, psychologists, etc. With the Division I programs. Division II has some as well. But I was so curious about your story as it relates to how did you navigate the BA, the MA. I think you have two masters, and then the doctorate program that you're either done with or working on, and wrapping up. It sounds like, but I'm just curious about that. And I have a follow up question, depending on the direction you go, because I think that's important. How you were able to successfully navigate it to now be that advocate, that professional to really bring about change, which is very much needed, as you've already made a great point.
Yeah, Lenroy, I'm glad that you're a fellow Spartan. And so I would say in my mom, like raised like a single mom, I was a person, I'm a figure it out person. Like if you tell me something, I'm gonna figure it out. And that's how I was in my bachelor's. We didn't have like academic support. You just figured it out. So I figured it out. I'm always one to like learn to navigate. And I mean, my first master's, I was like 23. I don't even know if I have that degree anywhere. Like 20 years ago, right? I'm 42 now. But my second master's was really about one thing that people are afraid to do is pivot. They're afraid to pivot really quickly. They want to have all the information. And I was talking to a friend, and she said that they went to some company, and the CEO said, "We make decisions on 60% of the information. Like we can't wait for 100%. You might not ever get 100%.
Right.
We make decisions with 60% of the information." And for me, I was in my second master's I started in conflict studies, and I didn't like it. And I found a class in this other degree program. I was like, I want to do that. So in the span of 24 hours, I literally pivoted to a whole new degree program. And so the one thing I tell people, if you're going to make a decision, you got to make it quick. And know that whatever decision you made it on the information you had at that point. And so many times we might kick ourselves and be like, oh, I wish I did this. You made the best decision with the best information you had at that point. And so for me, I pivoted to go to this other master's program that really changed my life. And from that, the gen of my bachelor's, master's, and then PhD are very different. Because when I finished my PhD in May of 22 of this year, and the gen of the PhD program was someone that fiercely was able to advocate for yourself and for other people. We had a professor that was trying to do some really shady stuff with the class, and we were like, we're not having that. And my cohort members, other professional age women, we're like, we're not doing that. Like, you got the wrong people. And so we're able to fiercely advocate because many times in PhD programs, PhD students are making $18,000, $20,000 a year. They can't mess that up. I own my own company, so I'm like, what y'all gonna do to me? Like, I don't really care, but I'm not gonna allow people to treat me like X, Y, and Z. And so for me, the navigation at my PhD was to be able to fiercely advocate in ways other people might not be able to. But also if they see someone doing this, they're like, okay, she's doing it, I can also advocate for myself as well.
Okay, so I do have to do a follow-up question because I wondered what direction you would go in, and what I want to pull out now is who's your mentors, how important mentorship is, because most masters, definitely doctoral, you have mentors that are in the space that you're in, whether it's in the program, outside the program, and then even at the bachelor's level and the master's levels too. And just wanted to get you to share a little bit about that.
The mentoring part is difficult because my degree, like I'm the only sport geographer in the world. So there's not people in this program. What I did was have a really good community around me of people who were like, hey, you're going to finish this program. Like you have no other option. You know, in my acknowledgments, I literally say, I finished this program out of spite because of two people. Like out of pure spite, these two people were not going to finish. One was definitely not going to finish before me. And one person, I did not want to hear his mouth for the rest of my life saying I was all but dissertation. So I finished it out of pure spite and pettiness. But I had a good community around me who, if I had a question or a need, they would uplift me and say, hey, here's who you talk to. Here's how you do this. And so I had really, really good community members. I had my chair of my doctorate was phenomenal. And anything I needed, he was like, we are going to figure it out. Anything I needed. And I can't say too much. I see a lot of people who want to pick chairs that are very popular in the profession. And I always say, pick a chair that will love you, that will protect you, that will be there for you. Because doing a PhD is really, really difficult. And if you don't have a chair that is there to be like, hey, come to the house for dinner, we're going to figure out, you need a grant, we're going to figure out that money. What do we need to do to help you? Like my chair, Kyle, I can't thank him enough because of how much love and protection he gave me. Anytime I went back to Michigan, his wife, they were like, you have to come over for a meal. Like no matter what, you're coming over for a meal. And that's what your PhD students need, is someone like that, not someone who is a big name, because many times if they're a big name, they have a lot going on. You need people who are going to really love and cherish you. That will be your chair or your committee.
Yes, great. Spoken like a true Spartan, and congratulations.
Yes.
As well.
Thanks, Lenroy. We appreciate your
Thank
questions.
you.
Okay, so while maybe a few others are thinking about questions or contributions you'd like to make, I want to shift and ask you about, and you've mentioned this before, but I want to go back to it. What does the Brittany Griner case and verdict sentencing say about the treatment of Black women, in your opinion?
Well, I first think it shows how vulnerable you are when you travel internationally. Yeah. Like I think that what we tend to see with a lot of people who are like, I hate the US, I'm going overseas. You don't know how vulnerable you are. Brittany Griner was in jail for like a month before we knew, and she was a professional athlete over there making millions of dollars. What does that mean for us who go over there? We literally could disappear and no one would know. No one would know for however long. I mean, it might be, I know my partner, Daniel, he's always like, call me when you touch down, So I feel like if I went a day, it would start to raise some red flags. But some folks, it might be a month because they don't usually talk to people that you can literally disappear. And so I think, to me, it brings up the vulnerability that we have, that you can literally disappear and it would be really difficult to find you. Mm-hmm. I think the next thing, the problem, I think that the next thing is people are like, well, Brittany Griner had this thing of weed and she should know better. I'm like, she's been going to Russia for 10 years. This is not the first time, right? There's a political aspect around it that made it different, but this isn't the first time it's happened. And so I think it shows that when Black and brown people push up against what the US is doing, how people will say, well, you deserve that. Mm-hmm. That's what you see. Well, Brittany said that the US wasn't good, so because of that, she gets what she deserves. It's like, that's what you think? Because what does James Baldwin say? I love this country so much that I get to then be the person to, what's the statement? How's it go? I love it so I can not talk badly, but I can say like things we need to change. I can't think of how the statement is. And that's what it is that people don't want to acknowledge that like two truths can be happening, that you can love a country, but also demand that there needs to be change for better. And we see this conversation because Black and brown people are saying we need to have more change. It's the assumption that we hate it. Yep.
Yeah.
So that we can criticize her perpetually. Thank you, Bianca. And
Mm,
people don't understand, like, you should be able to criticize something you love because you want it to be better. And so I
absolutely.
hate that people are like, well, Brittany, she's getting what she deserves. She deserves to be in jail for 10 years for saying that she wants our country she's a Black queer woman to be better for her. Like, what kind of truth is that? And so I think it shows how there's an expectation of assimilation in all aspects in order to be protected overseas. That you have
Mhm.
to never complain or criticize the US, and then you are deserving of protection. And I
Right.
think that's a very unfair truth. And so, but for me, the Brittany Griner, it's just like, no matter how much money you make, no matter the position of accolades you are,
Yep.
you could be in a Russian jail and never know when you're going to get out.
Yeah. Yeah. True reality. True reality. So
Mhm.
no, thank you for weighing in on that. So I'm going to go to the next question. I don't see any other hands raised right now, but we've been talking so much about the work of anti-racism relevant to kind of the coaching world and athletics and the impact that it may have on them. But I want to also draw some parallels to the anti-racism work that you see in athletics broadly and how it could be applicable to all organizations, because a lot of what you said, I can see very much it applying to the workplace of all these different corporations. And so how do you draw that parallel? And maybe this gives us a chance to learn a little bit deeper about the work that you do with organizations.
Yeah. So the way I look at this work is that it should not just be in a professional or athletics, it should be throughout your whole life,
Right.
right? This should be something that encompasses every aspect of your life. And that's where I think some people have the disconnect. They're like, oh, we're trying to do this in our office, and our department isn't doing this. I'm like, but what are you doing with your white kids? What are you
Yeah.
doing with your able-bodied kids? If I go into your kids' library, do I see books with characters of all different races, ethnicities, ability? Do I see books with hijab? Am I seeing that? Because you can't sit here and criticize your department, but you're not doing anything in your house. And so the work of anti-racism really should go throughout your whole life. It should be that you're able to talk to your parents and say what you're saying is unacceptable.
Mhm.
Because the reality of the situation is that if you're not going to tell the ones you love what they're doing is problematic, you ain't going to tell anyone else.
Right. Oh,
I mean, and
absolutely.
that's the thing, is that people have to understand that you should be able, if you're not holding people accountable in your circle, who are you going to hold accountable? And so this work really should bleed all throughout you. And so what I do is, I like, all of my stuff is very foundational. So if you listen to the work I do with NIH, the National Institute of Health, athletic departments, um, hair, like I've done stuff with like hair salons, curly hair products. It's all the same stuff, different analogies, but it's
Mhm.
all the same. Because my goal is that we have uniform language. And it's
Mm.
not fair if I use different definitions depending on who I'm with. So everyone gets the same stuff. It's just different analogies, maybe different slides of data, but I try and keep it uniform so that if you are in my session and then your partner's in my session for NIH, you all can talk about the same things because you have the same information.
Mhm. Mhm. No, I love that. I love that. Okay, so we're getting close to the top of the hour, but there's also something else that you're working on that I think is really interesting, and I want to give you a chance to share that. And it is an app. And so, Jen, why don't you just kind of unpack this for us? What is this app intending to do? What was the inspiration for it?
Oh my gosh, yes. So this is my baby. So I'm creating a group travel app. And the reason why I created this app was because if y'all manage group travel, you know it's brutal. Like, it's the most brutal thing in the world. People not sending their flight information in, their hotels. You don't know what's going on. It's usually one person responsible for all the documents. And so it's like, Jen, when does so and so fly in? When is this happening? And it's too much. And the emphasis of this was because I had my PhD graduation. And so literally I was having to not only think about when am I going to be walking, but also making sure everyone had their hotel room. Everyone was flying in. Oh, I didn't know so and so was flying in with me. How do we get cars? And so the emphasis is literally Portal, which is coordination plus people. It is meant to be the one place, it's the ecosystem for all your travel needs. You send in your flights, you send in your hotel documents, activities, every aspect, chat function, split pay, anything you can need is literally within this one ecosystem. And it's meant to make it so it's more community-based, not one person. So you can see when everyone flies in, you can see where everyone's staying, you can even see if they want their hotel room number toggled on and off. Every aspect is right there, from professional, personal, wedding parties, bar mitzvahs, graduations, professional movement, everything you can do in this one app.
I love it. And one of the other things that I know you shared is that the app will have a feature where you can provide resources that may be of need to certain communities.
Yep.
So please share that as well.
Yeah, one thing that we're doing is it has to be inclusive. And so what we're doing is we're partnering with other like disability groups because they have really good data on accessible hotels, accessible locations.
Yeah.
So we're partnering with them so that anyone can use this app. If you're LGBT, if you have disabilities, any of that stuff. And so the whole purpose is that if you are going with your mom who's in a wheelchair, you are going to be able to know what hotel rooms are accessible for her. You're going to be able to know if you're a caretaker, kids, like we're making sure we're partnering with people who do blogs on like the top 10 most accessible cities. Like we're going to make sure all of that stuff is included so that you don't have to leave the app for any aspect of your travel. And Andrea asked if you're a solo travel. Yep. So it does both solo and group. So all of that is in one place because I also do a lot of solo travel. So it's all going to be there. Also, there are tiers for announcements. So literally, if your partner like mine wants to know when I land and when I depart, it will literally send a text message. Jen's flight just landed. Jen's flight is departing. Jen's flight was delayed. So all of that stuff will be in there.
Love it. That sounds really interesting. And so you're in beta testing right now. Do you want to give us a little bit of insight as to when it will officially be available? Do you know that?
So if you go on the website and it says Let's Connect, you can sign up and send us and you just do your email address and you can either get more information or do beta testing. And so we're probably going to do beta testing within the next 2 weeks. So the more diverse groups, the better. And then we're hoping to go live before Thanksgiving because we know Thanksgiving travel, Christmas travel is going to be crazy. And we want to really help people with those type of events.
I love it. Love it. Okay. So we have about 3 minutes left. I want to give this audience a final chance. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. I would love to give you the chance. I would love to give you that opportunity before we close out. I'm also checking
please
to see if anything has come up here because I have lots of questions that I certainly could gravitate to, but I want to be mindful of our time.
Debbie, you want to know how you access the app? Go to the website, it's up there. And then once you get sign up and when we need beta testing, we'll shoot you that information.
Yep. And so we have placed into the chat the link to the app, portalapp.com. I like that name, by the way. Coordinating people. I love that. Okay, so we've talked about a lot today, Jen. I want to give you an opportunity to close this out with our final 2 moments. Is there anything that is on the horizon for you or that you're feeling a lot of energy around these days that you have not had an opportunity to share that you would like to? I want to give you that chance before we close out.
No, I mean, I've had such a phenomenal time on here, Doc. It's been great. I'd say the app is taking up a lot of my time because I really want this to be an amazing product that anyone could use. I think the next thing is y'all advocate for yourself. Like advocate the shit out of yourself. Like advocate. You deserve that raise. You deserve that promotion. Like you deserve all of that. So stop doubting it and just go advocate. Like advocate so hard because you believe in yourself and other people believe in you.
should hear
Advocate for yourself.
This one, just advocate for yourself. She was just going on about that. Advocate the shit out of you.
Okay, so we have someone that's unmuted, but we're at the end of our conversation nonetheless. And so I just want to thank you, Jen. I want to thank you for saying yes to our invitation. Thank you for coming and sharing with us. This has been so intriguing. And I look forward to continue to follow your success. And specifically, I look forward to learning more about the app. And I even mentioned that our team is going to be traveling for a team retreat in November. And I can definitely see how that could be of use for each of us coordinating our schedules. But anyway, we're so glad that you were able to join us today. And thank you to all of you who have spent a part of your Friday with us. We're wishing you a beautiful, safe, and healthy weekend. And we look forward to seeing you back next week on Intentional Conversations VodCast. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, friends.